All right, so get ready because today we're going deep, really deep,
I love a good deep dive.
into something, well, kind of unique, We're going to be looking at how one person brings together two ideas that seem like totally opposite:
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
atheism and subpersonalities.
Whoa, that's quite a pairing. I mean, those...
Yeah, not just like one or two subpersonalities either.
Okay.
We're talking 10 distinct subpersonalities, all in one person, who also says they're an atheist.
All right, so where are we getting all this from?
It's all laid out in this document called, get this, Reconciling Subpersonalities and Atheism.
Okay, I gotta admit, the title alone has me hooked.
Right. It's going to
Yeah.
make you rethink, like, how you view your own beliefs.
Right.
I mean, what even is a belief system?
Definitely a question worth exploring. This deep dive, it kind of goes beyond the typical, debate about atheism.
Right.
What I find really fascinating is that the author uses this whole framework to explore something we all deal with.
Oh, and what's that?
Reconciling different parts of ourselves. And not just different, but parts that can seem uh, almost contradictory.
Okay, so let's break this down. The author starts off, right, by drawing this clear line between what they call personal beliefs and universal beliefs.
I like where this is going. So what's the difference?
Think of it this way, saying, I work best at night. That's a personal belief. True for you, maybe not for everyone else.
Right, right. It's subjective.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then saying, like, gravity affects everyone equally, that's universal. It's supposed to be true, like, across the board.
Okay, yeah, I see that. One's about your own experience and the other is about, like, the world outside of you.
Yeah, yeah. And the author, they use that, the whole idea as the foundation for explaining why, at least for them, atheism and subpersonalities, they don't have to clash. So help me out here. How does that work? I mean, at first glance, it does seem a bit, I don't know, contradictory.
Well, the author argues that atheism is about, being skeptical, but specifically about those big external claims about how the universe works. It doesn't necessarily dictate what's going on inside your own head, your internal world.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Hmm.
But we got to talk about these 10 subpersonalities.
Oh, yeah. Bring on the subpersonalities.
Imagine, like, a whole team inside your head.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever felt like different parts of you kind of take over in different situations?
Oh, absolutely. Like, sometimes I'm super organized making to-do lists, and then other times I'm totally spontaneous, ready for anything.
There you go. That's kind of what the author's getting at with this whole subpersonality idea. Like, our minds, they operate in these different modes,
Yeah.
and each mode has its own, like, personality, its own set of traits and motivations.
So tell me more about these subpersonalities. Who are they?
Well, each one has a name. That's kind of wild. You've got Addie, who's all about adventure and spontaneity. But then there's Kenny, total opposite, loves structure, loves making lists. And it doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. We've also got Captain Bannock, the leader, Kelly the empath, charismatic Liz, playful Mac, Tommy the innovator, the wise Tira, determined Val, and disciplined Devin. It's a whole crew.
Okay, wow. That is a lot to unpack. But how does believing in all these different selves, how does that fit with atheism? I mean, isn't it a little, well, supernatural sounding?
Right. That's where the author draws a really important distinction. They see God as this external force,
Right.
like something outside of ourselves,
Right, right.
controlling everything, supposedly. But subpersonalities, those are internal. It's a way of understanding, like, the different parts of your own mind, not about separate beings or anything.
So instead of like invoking something supernatural, it's more like creating a map of your inner world.
That's a great way to put it. Think of it as like a personal cognitive model, not a statement about some universal truth, but your own unique way of understanding how you work.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But how do all these pieces fit together? How do you reconcile those personal and universal beliefs?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, and we'll dive into that right after this break.
Okay, so my brain is like buzzing right now. This is fascinating stuff. It's like we're, peeking into someone's brain and seeing their operating system in action.
It is pretty mind-blowing. Yeah.
It is. But does the author, do they address any potential issues with this whole way of thinking?
You mean like downsides?
Yeah. Like, if you start believing in all these internal truths, could you go too far?
You're right to point that out. There are some potential pitfalls, for sure.
Right.
And the author does acknowledge that, Like, they wonder, why do these subpersonalities feel so real, so convincing?
Yeah.
Even though, like, there's not a lot of scientific evidence to back them up.
Right. It's not like gravity.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like, what makes us accept some of these internal beliefs without needing that proof.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's tricky, right? Like, where's the line between honoring your own experience and letting your imagination just, run wild?
Totally.
Hmm.
And the author, they really wrestle with that tension, trying to figure out how to balance those things.
Okay, but how do they propose we do that? How do we hold on to those personal truths without sacrificing logic and reason?
Well, one solution they offer is like to have different standards of evidence depending on the type of belief.
What do you mean?
For personal beliefs, like these subpersonalities, they suggest things like practicality,
Practicality. Oh.
internal consistency, and emotional resonance. Maybe those are enough.
So if it helps you understand yourself, if it feels true to you, and if it, I don't know, resonates emotionally,
Yeah, yeah.
that's enough to justify it as a personal belief?
At least that's the author's thinking.
Right.
But for beliefs about, the external world, like the existence of God, they say you need a higher standard.
They still want proof.
Yeah, they want that objective proof, that logical consistency, because those claims, they impact everyone, not just one person.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like recognizing that our inner worlds can have their own truths,
Uh-huh.
but those truths, they don't have to apply to everyone else.
Exactly, exactly. And the author takes it a step further, saying we should be upfront about that, about the limits of our personal beliefs.
Whoa, interesting.
Saying, hey, this works for me, but I'm not saying it's a universal law.
I like that. It's about, I don't know, owning the subjective nature of our experiences.
Totally. But there's another piece here about how they specifically reconcile atheism and subpersonalities.
Right, right. Back to the main event.
The author really emphasizes that believing in subpersonalities doesn't mean bringing in, like, the supernatural.
Okay.
It's not about separate entities or anything like that. They argue that these subpersonalities can be explained naturally.
Naturally.
Yeah. Through things like, psychology,
Okay.
neuroscience,
Yeah.
how our brains are wired. It's not about multiple beings. It's about different facets of one mind.
Gotcha. So it's about self-understanding, not spirituality.
Exactly. And they point out how these two beliefs, they're justified differently.
In what way?
Well, atheism comes from applying skepticism to those huge claims about the universe.
Mm-hmm. Those universal beliefs.
Right. You got to have evidence that everyone can access. But subpersonalities, those are justified by how useful they are.
Useful.
Yeah. How well they fit within your own experience and how they make you feel.
So the author is advocating for a more, I don't know, a more nuanced view of belief.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just like black and white, true or false.
Yeah.
There's this whole spectrum, and different types of beliefs might need different levels of, I don't know, scrutiny.
Like different tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a key takeaway from all this like layered approach to belief that recognizes personal experience,
Right.
logic, and external evidence. You can be skeptical about, those big universal claims while still embracing what helps you understand your own inner world.
This really gets to the heart of the author's central question, right? Can these seemingly opposite beliefs coexist?
Yes. And from what we've seen so far, the author's answer seems to be a big yes. They see atheism and subpersonalities not as, like, fighting each other, but as frameworks that work together.
Okay, but working in different areas.
Exactly. Atheism guides their understanding of the external world, while subpersonalities provide, like, a map for their internal world.
Fascinating. Makes you think about your own beliefs, What standards do we each use?
Right. Like, are we as strict with our personal beliefs as we are with those big universal claims?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
The author would definitely agree with that. This isn't just about one person's beliefs. It's an invitation to examine our own epistemological frameworks.
Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack that one.
Uh-huh. Fair enough. It's a fancy way of saying, how do we decide what we believe and why?
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
It's about becoming more self-aware, I think.
Right. And speaking of examining things, there's this table in the document.
A table.
Yeah, it directly compares God and subpersonalities.
Oh, interesting.
It's striking how differently they're described.
What do you mean?
Like their nature, the evidence used to support them, their purpose, even the logic behind them.
I see. It's a way to visualize the differences.
Yeah, it really highlights how those beliefs are judged by different criteria. Belief in God, it's often based on, I don't know, faith, tradition, personal experiences.
Okay.
But belief in subpersonalities, at least for this author, it's about personal experience, how practical it is, and how it fits with their inner world.
So recognizing those different standards, that's key to reconciling these seemingly opposite beliefs.
It's like recognizing they operate in different realms, you know?
Absolutely. You can hold both without sacrificing logic. That's the point the author is making.
It's like having different tools for different jobs, right? You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Perfect analogy. And the author seems to be saying we shouldn't use the same standards of proof for our personal beliefs as we do for claims about, like, the entire universe.
It's about being more flexible, right?
Yeah. Recognizing that our inner worlds have their own kind of truth.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I'm really intrigued by the fact that the author, they take the time to, like, self-reflect.
Self-reflect, yeah.
Yeah, and point out potential weaknesses in their own thinking. What are they, I don't know, wrestling with there?
They're really thinking critically about their own beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, this is my perspective and it's the only right one. They're questioning their own assumptions, like, why do these subpersonalities feel so real, so convincing?
Yeah, especially without that, scientific backing.
Exactly. It's not like we can measure subpersonalities under a microscope.
Right. So what explanations do they offer?
Well, they explore a few possibilities, like maybe it's the subjective coherence.
Subjective coherence.
Yeah, like how well the belief fits with their own experiences, emotions, and thoughts.
It helps them make sense of their inner world.
Exactly. Then they consider the practical utility of the belief.
So, like, does it actually help them in their life?
Yeah. Does it help them make decisions or navigate relationships, things like that?
Okay, practicality makes sense.
And finally, they acknowledge the emotional resonance of the concept. It's like how it just feels right, even if they can't fully explain it.
That gut feeling.
Exactly. Sometimes a belief just resonates with us on a deep level.
Totally. It's not always about cold, hard logic. It's about how it makes you feel.
Absolutely. And the author seems to be, like, wrestling with how to balance all these factors when evaluating their own beliefs.
Right, the logic, the practicality, the emotional side of things.
They also bring up another question about what guides their acceptance of these internal models versus those external claims.
That's huge. Like, what are the rules for deciding what to believe, right?
It's a fundamental question, and they offer a few possible principles that might be at play.
Lay it on me.
They call them the practical utility principle, the subjective coherence principle, and the emotional resonance principle.
Okay, those are some fancy names.
I know, right? But they're actually pretty straightforward.
So break them down for me. How do these principles actually work?
Okay, so the practical utility principle, it basically says, if it's useful, it's worth believing, at least when it comes to those personal beliefs.
So if believing in subpersonalities helps me function better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it helps you understand yourself, make better choices, then maybe it's worth holding on to, even without a ton of external evidence.
Okay, so it's not about proving it to the world. It's about how it helps you.
Exactly. Then there's the subjective coherence principle.
Okay, what's that one about?
This one focuses on how well a belief aligns with your own experiences and internal logic.
So if believing in subpersonalities feels true based on how I experience the world.
Yeah. If it fits into your own personal narrative, then it might feel coherent, even if someone else wouldn't get it.
It's about your own internal consistency.
Right. And lastly, the emotional resonance principle.
That gut feeling we talked about.
Exactly. This principle recognizes that sometimes a belief just feels right.
Even if you can't explain it logically?
Totally. And the author seems to be saying that this feeling can be a valid justification for personal beliefs.
It's like that aha moment, when something just clicks.
Exactly. But the important thing is, the author isn't saying one of these principles is right and the others are wrong.
Okay.
They're just presenting them as possible ways we make sense of these personal beliefs.
Like tools for self-reflection.
Yeah. We can use them to examine our own beliefs, understand why we hold them.
And the author actually gives examples of how they might apply these principles.
Oh, that's helpful. How do they do that?
They suggest they lean on the practical utility principle for their belief in subpersonalities.
Makes sense. It helps them understand themselves.
But for atheism, they stick with a more evidence-based approach.
So different tools for different beliefs.
Right. And I think that's a key takeaway here. Recognizing that different belief systems might need different approaches.
We don't have to use the same yardstick for everything.
It's about being more flexible with how we define truth,
Totally. And the author points out that recognizing those limits, acknowledging the subjective nature of our beliefs, can actually be freeing.
Oh, how so?
It takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
We don't have to defend every single belief as some universal truth.
It's okay to have beliefs that are personally meaningful, even if they're not scientifically proven.
Exactly. And it opens us up to other perspectives, even if they seem to contradict our own.
Now, before we wrap up, the author asks two really thought-provoking questions.
Okay, yeah, I'm all ears.
First, what is the primary function of my belief in subpersonalities?
Okay.
And second, do I see the two belief systems, atheism and subpersonalities, as conflicting or complementary?
Deep questions. How does the author answer them?
They say that believing in subpersonalities is mostly about self-understanding, personal growth, and emotional balance. So it's rooted in usefulness, not universal truth. And that leads them to see atheism and subpersonalities as complementary, not conflicting.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin, working together to help them understand the world.
Exactly. And this whole deep dive, it's really challenged us to examine our own beliefs, how we justify them, and the limits we place on them.
It's been a journey of self-discovery for sure.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. If our inner worlds can have their own truths, what does that say about belief itself?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Do we each create our own realities, our own unique maps of meaning? And if so, how do we navigate those places where our maps overlap, collide, or just drift apart?
Big questions to ponder.
I encourage everyone listening to reflect on their own beliefs. Do you have any frameworks that help you understand yourself, even if they wouldn't necessarily hold up as universal truth?
It's an invitation to explore our own epistemologies, how we know what we know.
And maybe in that exploration, we'll discover not just what we believe, but why.
Beautifully put. It's been a fascinating deep dive.
And who knows what other fascinating perspectives await us in future deep dives. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.